Welcome back to day 2 of the 2021 Texas Workforce Commission Virtual Forum. Enjoy your session, and remember, complete the survey for each session that you attend. These surveys will be sent to you via email at the end of each session.
Hello, my name is Karen Cook, and I'm the Assessment Supervisor for ACC, and I oversee all our adult education programs for pre- and post-testing, including our ESL program, our HSC program, college prep, career pathways, and I'm excited to be here to share with you some ways we've started our remote testing process and have been improving on it. And now here's Jean.
Hi, I'm Jean Friedman. Good morning, everyone. I work with Karen as a coordinator of assessment with our adult education program.
Okay. So how we began creating this process was like April of May of last year. We began looking at remote assessment processes for both Best Plus and CASAs. We helped CASA pilot the remote process. We dealt with CASA's National and helped them pilot and gave some suggestions that would help our program. In May and June, we started progress testing because we were virtual at the time. Some of our classes already in existence, and really fine-tuning our process and seeing what was going to go wrong and what was going right. In July and August of this year, we really rolled out our remote processes to test all our new students registering for fall 2020. And then from September to now, we've been working on improving this process for both our existing and new incoming students, both in baseline testing and progress testing. So I'd like to think we've been fairly successful with this. For Best Plus, we have administered approximately 3,000 tests, and that's probably gone up since we did this PowerPoint, and about 1,400 have been post-test. For CASAs, we've administered about 2,500 tests and about 418, and again, that number's gone up since this. We have been post-testing as well. To date, it appears we have met our MSG performance target, so we're really happy about that. So some things we're going to talk about is how to create your virtual testing format, how to develop a scheduling process, develop a communication, which we found was really difficult in this process. You really need to have a communication process, and how to keep it going and to take that process and move it forward for progress testing so you can meet all your targets for MSG. So the first thing we did was to create our virtual testing format. At ACC, our university or the community college uses Blackboard Collaborate. So we use that for our ESL programs that Best Plus test. But for CASA testing, we found that Zoom worked better. So we actually have two testing formats, Blackboard Collaborate and Zoom. So this is our basic process or our basic format. This would be in Zoom. It's a little different than in Blackboard, but in both we have a main room with a moderator or host. In Zoom, we have a waiting room, and the students are placed in a waiting room and admitted one at a time. In Blackboard, they just are scheduled and they come into the main room, and we speak to them, we vet their technology to see if they're able to test, and if they are, we move them to pre-assigned breakout rooms where we have test administrators or proctors there to administer the test, check their ID in a private, for PII in a private. And then we also, we'll talk about this further, is once we have the students with a Zoom link or a Blackboard Collaborate link, we really want to keep those students and complete our registration process. So then from there, we ended up sending them to another breakout room where they could do application and their registration and get their class. And that has worked really well for us. We also have other rooms if they have issues with tech that we try to have tech help so it's not slowing the process down in the main room. So one of the important things to organize this remote testing event was to train the host or the moderator to control the flow of the students. And as we started doing this, we realized that was the main role of the host. We are a large program, so we knew we had to test many students virtually, and that was going to be hard. So we had to take in a lot of numbers and have a system that flowed. So that's really what we realized the role of this host or moderator was. With that in mind, we realized we needed to create a co-host role that could maybe deal more with the tech issues, or if our proctor or our test administrator needed help, we could have them leave and go into the breakout room without leaving the main room empty. So we kind of it worked out really well for us to have like a host and a co-host. And we did a lot of training for those positions. And so when possible, like in Zoom, we could create a waiting room with personalized messages for students. So if they're in that waiting room, they know they're in the right place. We would have welcome to HSE, registration and testing. For ESL, we would bring them in one at a time, or they'd come into the main room. But that was important for us. And as I spoke earlier, we really came up with this idea to have one link where students could take their assessment, and register for their class at the same time. Because we all know it's very difficult once you have your students, even in the face-to-face world, to have them come back again. That's a lot to keep track of. Maybe they test, but oh, they didn't register. And when we're dealing with 4,000 students, that was really hard. So to keep those two things together, we call it step 2 and 3 in our process, was very beneficial. So what we do is we added additional breakout rooms for our registration staff in there as well. And when the student was finished testing, the host or the co-host moves the student from testing to registration. And the registration staff has access to the same shared testing rosters. And we're going to go into that a little more in the PowerPoint, but we have shared testing rosters. So when they finish testing, the proctor or the test administrator would put their score in. So when they went to registration, the registration staff had access to their score and was able to place them in an appropriate class. And also, and I know I showed you our timeline, we did a lot of experimenting and practicing before we seemed to get things that kind of clicked and worked well for us. So I would say for any program, make sure you set aside time to train your staff and then experiment and practice on your processes, because we, and like everyone, we had to keep changing, keep adapting. Things change even from what was going on in July to now. So we're always adapting and experimenting and practicing that. What we realized, I'd like to talk about kind of things that we realized that didn't go too well, is one size did not fit all. Like what we needed virtually for Best Plus testing was different than what the CASA format was. And so we were trying at the beginning to use one format, and we were like, yeah, that's not going to work. So we have similar processes through those testing formats, but we went with Blackboard Collaborate for our ESL students and Zoom for our other programs that use CASA as testing. So now once you have your format, or you have the way that you want to test what virtual platform you're going to use, you really need to develop a scheduling process. There's so many pieces moving around, and you need to really put time into thinking, I need to test. For us, it was a large number. We needed to test maybe I'm just throwing this out, 2,000 HSE or 2,000 ESL and 1,000 HSE students, and we're going to go backwards and figure out how can we accomplish that. So we had to create a scheduling process. So one thing we did, and we'll be able to show you some, is we designed schedules where assessment staff, we use a lot of Google. So we would have a Google Doc where they could sign up for testing, see the event information, like what the day and time of this testing, is it a baseline testing event or progress testing? There they could access the session link, either Zoom or the Blackboard Collaborate, and then they could see the testing rosters. Our coordinators work on building a roster, so for every session that we had already pre-filled in who was testing that day. We use ACC ID numbers, and that all the proctors had to do was find the student on the roster and put their score in there. So that was really important for us to create a one location where everything is at, instead of sending multiple emails. And this is an example of it. So this is a ESL one because it's a Blackboard Collaborate. So you could see we have a baseline, the date, the session name, that's just what we use, the time, the people who work the event could find the Blackboard Collaborate link, who's hosting, who's co-hosting, our test administrators, and our reg room. Now remember, this is only for our staff. We send out separate emails for our students, and we'll talk about that a little, but this is just for our staff to know who's working. They also sign up to work in this place. Like you might see some blanks right here for test administrator proctor number 4. Someone could sign up here, and we communicate that to them. So the next thing is how to create these testing rosters. We make these shareable with the staff that are working it. Having testing rosters helps control the flow of students through the virtual platform. We create our schedules with attrition in mind. For ESL, our schedule now allows for like 5 students every 30 minutes with 4 test administrators. And for HSE, we were up to about 10 students for every hour with 4 to 5 proctors. These numbers work well for us now, but when we started, we had fewer appointments and only increased as we got better with remote testing. And these were the rosters where we were able to record the scores so the registration staff could see it and any technology issues we had. So I can give the example, and maybe Jean can chime in for ESL. She does that program. For HSE, we started, I think, every hour only having about 15 or 14, 16 maybe. Well, I'm getting lost here, but we're up to 40 students an hour or 40 students a session. We do about 13 students an hour. We make appointments for about 13 to 14 students for each hour. In the past, we only did like 8 or 9. So we've built on that as we've gotten better and improved our flow. You have to look at your program and see what type of attrition you have. You know, for us, we realized we could handle 10 students an hour for HSE because we probably only have maybe 6 or 7 that show up. So we schedule each session for HSE, for CASA, 40 students a session, and probably on the average test about 20, 25, 26, something like that. I'm going to go ahead. Jean, do you want to chime in on how you do ESL?
Well, real quick, our attrition in ESL was much less. Those students do tend to show up for their appointments. And we started with 4 students every half hour and 4 test administrators. And we've increased that number now to 5 to allow for that one student that may not show up in that half hour. But our attrition is much less in ESL.
Yes. And those are all things, within your programs that your numbers better. And that's how we kind of fine-tuned, because we needed to test a lot of students. We're a large program, so we were really trying to test as many as we could with, of course, the staff we had, because as we all know, staffing for assessment virtually is really difficult. And here you can see, this is an ESL one. She took the last names off, but we would have their student ID, their last name, their first name. This is their appointment time, and you can see she has 5 at 4 o'clock, 5 at 4:30, 5 at 5. So we stagger. They're given the same link, but with our data team and a mail merge, we email them, give them their date and time that they selected on a Google form when they register, but they don't know the time. So we assign them a time and then the link, and they come in, they test. You can see that we write their score down. And then if they're a top out, we have that as well. Then we have notes from assessment, like if they were a no-show, who we send them to. That was also important to controlling the flow. We mark what breakout room they were in. And then we have notes for our registration team as well, because again, when they finish testing, they go straight to registration. So this has worked really well for us. And this is an HSC testing roster. It's a little different. You can see we have 10 appointments. We have students coming in at 3:30. And at HSC, we're in Zoom. So they come into a waiting room and they have a message saying, welcome to this event. Then we bring them in one at a time. We vet them. You can see here we have Windows 10s, video on Chromebook, because sometimes they don't have video on their computer, and we find all kinds of ways. We're getting a lot better with that. If they have an iPad, we put that. We also say what breakout room they went to. They went to Surrey's, our Maddie's, our Isabel's. And then when they're finished with the test, we have their scores, because again, they're going to registration, and now this is shared also with the registration staff so that they can register them in the appropriate level class. So when we created this scheduling process, what didn't work? Well, I think the hardest part was getting the numbers right. How many students could we expect to test in a session? We wanted to optimize, our staffing and how many people that we could move through a session without having students waiting too long. I am respectful of their time as well, and I want to make sure that we move them through as quickly as possible. And we really have hit a good number. I think it also is a combination that we've gotten better. We've gotten better solving technology issues, like everyone here. We're getting better with our technology and how to solve and work with students to solve their technology issues. That's important as well. And I think we've improved with that. So, we've been able to add more students through. And then when you schedule carefully, because once links are sent out, the schedule cannot be changed. We have had maybe very few, but when you have the wrong link sent, it becomes difficult. If you send it, but we have a system in place where we check and double check that we are sending correct links to our students, so they're going to the right place. So that's something to think about when you're developing that. If you're sending links with this number of people, we have to work closely with our data team to make sure that we're sending the right links. And then the step 3 process. Develop a process for communication to students and their staff. I want to say that this was one of the hardest things to do, because as you know, communication, you think everyone understands what you put in an email, and you don't. So the shared place where we call it an HSC resource page, where we give all information. to our staff that work in a testing event was really beneficial once they learned how to use it. That helped us communicate better to our staff. We design emails to communicate testing date and time, session link, and test requirements. I'll show you some of our emails here. Well, I guess it's not going to open up in this format. The hyperlinks won't work. Sorry about that, guys. But I can tell you what is on the email. For both ESL and HSE, we have developed our own YouTube videos that we include on there to kind of explain the process to them. We also give tech requirements for CASAs. We do that with the Windows 10 and different things that if they want to use an iPad, how to download the app. For both of them, we also show how to, especially in the beginning in the summer, how to download Zoom on your phone, how to use Zoom on your phone or Zoom on your laptop or Blackboard Collaborate. I mean, a lot of this is challenging, digital literacy is difficult in the adult ed world. So we really broke it down as easy as possible, giving them visuals. In this letter, we also include their appointment date and time and their link to either Zoom or Blackboard. Can you think of anything else, Jean, that we include in that letter? Because we aren't able to see it.
No, that was pretty thorough. I will say that, we took time writing out these emails and creating a template that we use consistently. And we went through several drafts because we needed that communication to be as clear and concise as possible for the students. And of course, the email we designed and sent to our ESL students had to be much more simple and direct and forward versus the email that we could send to our HSE students that could have a little bit more information and language complexity in it. So that took some time.
Yeah, there was a lot of drafts. And you know what, Jean, I think at the end of this, before maybe during the Q&A, I think you can share, if you want to pull up that at the end, we can maybe show, if we have time, the emails and the resource page. I think you just chatted me that. So if you want to work on that.
Sure.
For the end of this. We also have this resource page, and I will say this is Jean's super organized, but all of my coordinators are really good at keeping everything organized. And this is where we put our training videos, we put our templates to our emails, we put our YouTube video, which we had never done a YouTube video before this. We are learning a lot. We also put any technology issues we have, because with CASAs, certain things happen over and over that you go, oh, you need to do this. So we put little tidbits of that. We have where they sign in and record their hours for working, because I have to monitor that as well. So we have a Google form that after each staff member works, they sign in to put their hours that I can cross-reference with. So everything is on this page, and the testing rosters, and I'm pretty sure we'll be able to show this at the end of the video or at the end of the PowerPoint. Another problem we have is during the session, and I think we do it in Best Plus and CASA testing, even though Best Plus you're able to communicate, Blackboard Collaborate, you're able to communicate more in chat. With Zoom, the only way you can chat from like a main room to a breakout room or a breakout room to a breakout room is like where everyone sees it. Now, Zoom is always changing and we're always adapting to that. But we really realized that we open a Google chat for everyone in that testing session. We're big Google users at ACC. So our host or moderator will open a chat in the email with everyone, that's working that session. So if there's a problem, or if we're sending a student over, we're just chatting, and that's the way we kind of learned to communicate in Zoom without disturbing our students or the people working the event. And what didn't work in communication, it's always that, like that perfect point where you're not sending too much information and not sending enough information. I find that it's, like Jean just said, we sent a lot of emails and we put a lot of thought into our emails because you can't put too much in there or they won't read it, how it looks. And this is both to students and staff. We really think about that. They don't read their emails. They're only going to read a few blurb or important points. So we try to highlight that as well, what we think is important. So we put a lot of effort into our emails. So finally, step 4, keep it going, progress testing. So once for us, we started baseline testing and getting our enrollment up and getting students into class and serving them, we realized that we needed to progress test and meet that MSG goals. So we took our same processes basically and moved it into progress testing and kind of following the 4 C's, we say. We create a progress testing schedule. And I can give you an example for HSE. We kind of looked at all our classes, concurrent classes that were held, like if it was Monday, Wednesday mornings, we're a large program, so we might have 6 classes, 7 classes, 6 classes on Monday, Wednesday mornings. And we would take all those classes, tell them this is your testing date, whatever Monday or Wednesday it is. And again, we would stagger those students in. Like class could be maybe anywhere from 8 to 12 or so. So we have some early ones at 7, but for the most part, 8 or 12, we'd have some class coming in at 8, some coming in at 9, some coming in at 10. But all the Monday, Wednesday classes in the morning are going to test on one day and be given the same link. And that's worked really well for us. We're doing that right now. We're in the middle of doing some more progress testing. And we have a shared testing information thing for all our instructors, another shared sheet that they can see when their testing time is. The link is there. We have rosters for who needs to test because we target students that need to test in each class. So everyone has one location that they can find that. And for ESL, it's a little different, but it works well. Jean's created a schedule of testing dates and times, and the test administrators will just sign up to test a class. And we might say we're progress testing for 4 weeks usually. And the test administrator has that flexibility to say, well, I'm going to test your class on this day and lets the instructor know. And they're kind of responsible for that class. So they can come back 1 or 2 times, depending on the size of the class. So that's worked really well for ESL. We communicate with the instructors and the test administrators and proctors. Again, once they've selected that, we always use calendar invites, for those 2 to 3 days before. We might email them and say, this is the day I'm coming. But 2 to 3 days before, we will again do a calendar invite so that everyone's on the same page and didn't forget. So we complete the progress testing, and then we collect data and scores. And I'm going to for CASAs, that's very easy. We just have a data team and we send the scores. I'm going to let Jean, if any of y'all are familiar with Best Plus and how that works, kind of explain what she created with Dropboxes.
Yeah, so for ESL and for Best Plus, we have to, of course, collect and process the scores. And in the face-to-face world, of course, we would have access to the testing laptops that our test administrators were using and be able to collect all of that. But that's been part of our training process, is to teach the test administrators how to back up and send us those scores. And so once they have backed up their file, that MDB file for Best Plus. We decided that the most efficient way to get those is, rather than having them email me individually, is I created folders, which we call our Dropboxes, in Google. And for baseline testing, the folder will be the date. So if we have a baseline testing event for incoming students on April 21st, then that folder would be where everyone testing in that event would put their backup file from Best Plus. And then for progress testing, I just made individual files for each test administrator. So if I have a test administrator, Karen, and she's going in and doing progress testing for some of our classes, each time she finishes progress testing for a class, she would do a backup file and put it into her individual folder, Karen, and then I would know to go in there and grab that file and be able to process the scores.
Thanks, Jean. So one thing that we do is we target students term by term. We have terms and we have term 1, 2, 3, and 4. So before, spring break, probably, middle of March, we were progress testing, our students that started in term 1 and 2. So we really focused on those students. Right now, after spring break, I kind of like to say we're progress testing our students that started in January, our term 3, and 4 students. Our term 4 just started now, so we'll probably test them in term 5. So we really, because of the virtual world, we can only test so many students, so we have to really target and get the students that were in first or are up for testing, and make sure that we're kind of testing our term 1 and 2 before spring break by March, and then people that start from January on, we're testing like April and May. And so that's been important to us, and I think that was a big part of us getting our MSGs this year. Training our staff, there's a lot of training involved. And know the numbers, track informally. I mean, we use Teams, and our data team really uses Teams in all their reports, but we kind of informally track. If I go to a class and they were scheduled, 6 people were scheduled to test and only 2 tested, on one of our forms, we will mark that, so we're trying to track how successful we are and kind of getting our own pulse on that. So that's how we do the MSG. Technology, what didn't work with progress testing, just technology. In general, testing, we all know our students have trouble. Attendance, when we're progress testing, letting students know and having the instructor say, we give them the date well in advance, probably 2 weeks at least in advance, to make sure they attend class on that day. In the virtual world, it's really hard to schedule a makeup. It's not like a paper test where you can give it to them. We're 100% virtual still. And I don't know if we'll be going face-to-face maybe by the end of the summer, but unlimited testing. So having that flexibility, the virtual world does not give us much flexibility. We have a large number, of enrollment. So even that in itself doesn't give us much flexibility, but now adding the virtual part to it, we try, and I think we do a fairly good job, but there's sometimes we have to prioritize, and I hate doing that in the adult ed world with testing. It's almost like the gatekeeper and to get a student into a class. So we really try to work with everyone, and that's why communicating information is important, so we don't have to do as much makeup testing. And then I want to also say that don't give up. I mean, I do these trainings and I look at all of our systems that we have, and I am thankful I have an awesome team that puts this together. We have a great data team too. So it's overwhelming, but it was just little steps at a time to get where we are now. It's been a year, over a year. So I would say, just if you see something in this presentation that you can work on and improve, I feel like that's a success. If you feel like you're having trouble scheduling people, maybe take part of that, or if it's communication, part of that, just do a little bit at a time. Don't give up, and just keep going at it. We had a lot of, I love, Jean has this in here, and I love it because we had a lot of castles that sank, that did not work well. And looking now, I can look back when I'm talking and giving this, it's like, oh, how much work we put in there, but it was just a little bit at a time, and we just kept adding and adding to it. And even we go to the face-to-face world, a lot of this that we have created is going to be super beneficial for us. Like everyone, you're going to probably be redefining how you do assessment, even when you go into the face-to-face world. I know we are, and so I think in the long run, kind of taking time to really look at your processes and try to improve them or work on changing them is going to help everyone. So let me see, Jean, were you able to maybe share your screen? Can you do
I have
that?
everything ready to share. I'm not sure that I have
The
controls
power.
to be able to
Yeah,
share.
so maybe someone can give you the power to share, and then you can share the email template. Is that possible?
I, I don't know with our producer whether they can.
Yeah, is our producer here?
Yes, what was the question? Sorry.
Can you give Jean access to present so she can share?
I definitely can.
Thank you.
Thank you. And then thank you. I'm now the presenter. So I'm going to just share a few of those links that we were unable to share previously. And I'm going to share my screen. There we go. Okay, so at this point, let's see, I have up a schedule. Am I sharing that? Is that what you're seeing, Karen?
Yes.
Okay,
this class testing, so yes.
Okay, so I'm going to go first to a resource page. So Karen talked about that we create resource pages for our assessment staff that has everything on that page that our staff would need for testing. And this is an example of our resource page for our ESL assessment. And we have links for what they're going to need if they're working one of our baseline sessions, which is our sessions where we're testing. These are our big sessions where we have 40 students scheduled to come in and test that are new incoming students. And then we also have what do they need for in-class testing. And this is our progress testing, our post-testing throughout the year. And here we'll put the schedules that they can access where they can sign up for testing. We have quick little step-by-steps after they've gone through the training, if they need to come back and remember, okay, I've signed up to work this session. What do I need to do next? What do I need to do? Links to those Dropbox folders that I mentioned, as well as rosters, timesheets. Our registration staff that we work with also puts their information on here for their staff. And any training PowerPoints, how-to documents, videos will include on here as well. And then the HSE, roster or resource page is going to be very similar in that what do they need for testing, how-to documents, videos, resources as well. And this is proved, of course, just for us so that we're not constantly having to send our assessment staff links to things. It has been invaluable just for them to have access to what they need once they're trained and testing for us. I'm sorry, the little drop down thing keeps getting in my way here. This is an example of a progress testing schedule for ESL, where we create a schedule that's by class, date, and time that our staff can go in and sign up to test. So if I come back up to the top, we do Monday, Wednesday classes, where the staff can come in and they can see the class level, day, and time. And then they can, okay, well, I can go test a class on a Monday or a Wednesday morning. They'll sign up their name. They'll put the dates that they're going to go into that class to test. And here they will find the link to the class as well as a link to the testing roster as well. So they'll know who needs to test. And then we just track information, as Karen was saying, about who needs to test, how many actually tested. You can see we're completing it right now. 6 in this class tested, and then 1 made an MSG. And we keep our running total of numbers at the end as well. This is kind of our informal count for assessment. Just we can see how we're doing as we go through a testing period here. And then the emails that we talked about, those templates that we create. We have an HSE template here that the student will receive when they're testing, videos on preparing some of the technology needs and requirements, and links to documents if they need to get their iPad ready for testing. And then what they're going to need within the testing session itself and the link to that. And then the email for the ESL, as I said, needed to be much simpler, straightforward. Here is your appointment, time, and date to show up. Click this link, and you can watch a video on what this process is going to look like for you that we created on YouTube. So much more straightforward and simple for our ESL students.
And I want to say, I think the videos really prepared a lot of our students. I know for ESL, it kind of maybe made them less anxious about the process. For HSE, and there's just a lot of information to put in that email, and it can be somewhat wordy, but we try to highlight the important things, but some people do read the emails. I was surprised that I had several HSE students that showed up with their iPad all ready to go. If they don't, that's fine. We walked them through the process, but I knew they read the email because they said, no, I set it up already. Because I think, we underestimate some of our students. They're very tech savvy in HSE, and some aren't, and some have digital. We have a lot more that probably have digital literacy issues, but a lot of them did, and that really helped us a lot when they came prepared. They had a Windows 10. They read the email, and we really liked that. And they saw the YouTube video and knew what to expect. And I was just going to go ahead, and I saw a few. I guess it's kind of our Q&A time. So I wanted to answer a few questions that are in here. Are students who only have cell phones able to test in CASAS or Best Plus? So Best Plus, the majority of our students, I think Jean would agree, test on their cell phone because it's an oral test. With both assessments, you have to be able to visually see them, and they have to have visual and audio capabilities. So with the Best Plus, it's easy to do that on the phone because it's an oral assessment. With CASAS, we try anything to get our students to test. So sometimes they'll come in on a computer, but their video capability doesn't work or their internet is poor. So then we'll say, well, come in on your phone. And if you don't know much about the CASA test, you can take it on the iPad. And that will work, but it locks the browser, so Zoom doesn't work, so you can't proctor them, you can't see them. So the process is that they come in on a cell phone as well. That way they prop the cell phone up and we're visually watching them on the video capabilities of a cell phone as they're taking the test on the iPad. If they're on a Windows 10 device, you can do them both on the Windows 10 device at the same time. I think I mentioned earlier, we work a lot with CASA's, Linda Taylor and CASA's, and help them pilot different programs. And right now we are piloting taking the CASA's test on a cell phone, which opens a lot of possibilities and doors for our students that don't have a Windows 10 device or an iPad. And that's gone really well. I think we started maybe 2 weeks ago, and we've tested several students and they've had no problems. It also opens the door if they have a tablet that kind of runs on the same iOS type thing as a cell phone, that they can take a test on a tablet as well. And we're working with CASAs, and hopefully this pilot will go well and they'll be offering that up for virtual testing in the future. So that is one. Text reminding our students. Someone asked about that in the chat. I think the instructors of the programs will use text remind, different various forms of that, to remind them of their testing date. I think in the past we might have done that. Since virtual, we're just doing emails. We also started at ACC doing our application online using Salesforce. So there's a lot of hurdles for our students in the technology now, and we had to increase our front desk resource to help students complete applications. We're on a push to have our students use their ACC emails, and that is a lot with PII now as well. So we are pushing at this point for students to kind of what we say claim their ACC email address so that we can be sending all our information through ACC emails. But teachers, once they're in the class, I know that many teachers use the text reminder aspects of, this is your testing date, don't forget.
Right. And we also try with our timing with our communication for our students that are beginning the process. They filled out their online application and chosen their testing date. They'll get a follow-up email that reinforces, okay, you've completed the process, we've gotten your application. And then our data team works again with that email template, and within, I believe it's 24 to 48 hours before their test date, because they may fill out their application 2 weeks or more before their actual date that they come in to test and register. And so we make sure that kind of final email goes out like 48 hours before that date that they're supposed to come back. So that's their reminder.
Yes. So I'm just going to open the floor. I guess, is there any other questions or any last minute things, Jean, that you would think you would like to say that's going on new in the ESL world, or no?
One of the reasons, I will just say that one of the reasons that we have two different platforms, we use Blackboard Collaborate for ESL and Zoom for CASAS, is that when we first started all of this back in the spring of 2020, Zoom was not an approved platform with ACC. They would not let us use Zoom. And so we were looking at WebEx, we were looking at Google Meet, and then eventually settled on Blackboard Collaborate as our platform that we would move forward with. And it worked very successfully for the most part. There's always technology issues with our students, especially with bandwidth. However, we very quickly discovered in building one of our castles, as we talked about, that CASAs does not work in the Blackboard format, that once you put a student into a breakout room and get them to launch the test into its, secure mode, you lose all contact with the student. So that was one of those back to the drawing board, and we really had to push to get Zoom approved as a platform so that we could successfully test our students. And so now we're looking at, do we want to kind of morph our ESL process, that initial process where they come in to test and register? Do we want to morph that into the Zoom format? Here we are a year later. So that's going to be on the table for possibly changing in that format as well. So it's, as Karen said, it's just an ongoing adaptation.
Yeah. And I just wanted to, I know we have a few more minutes and some of our struggles, and I know a lot of you have the same struggle, is staffing. Virtual testing takes so many more people, and becoming efficient at it was the only way we were able to test a large number. But having said that, for us, it's becoming like trying to train people. We have staff that could work, but they have to be trained. It's a different type of training. In the past, we've used a lot of our instructors for testing, and we still do, but I find that it's a different skill set to do remote testing as well. So we did recently hire hourlies for the first time ever just for assessment. And we are training them, and they're working just in assessment, and that's going to work out well, I think. The training is very vital, to have everything at such a large enrollment number, and trying to do that. So training took a big part of my time and all my coordinators' times to train our staff, and that's been difficult. We're crying a lot for people to help us when we have a lot of sessions. Sometimes we don't have enough staff. So staffing issue and finding the funds to staff for virtual testing has been one of our biggest problems, and we're constantly working on that as well. But we've been fairly successful, and we just keep on moving. So I guess we have 5 minutes left. Is there any other questions, or I can bring it back to the the producer? Hello? Any other questions?
I'm not seeing any other questions coming into the Q&A window at this time.
Okay. I think we're good though. If anyone has any questions for us, I can put in the chat my email at work, and feel free to email me about any questions you have about our process, or if you think of a question after you look at things. Please feel free to email me or Jean, and we'll be glad to answer any questions you have. Thank you.
Thank you for attending the 2021 Texas Workforce Commission Virtual Forum. We trust the information was beneficial and will help us better serve the people of Texas. We will see you next year.